Okay, it's time for us to have a little talk. I've been wanting to talk about this for a little while now because it seems like it's something that Ken and I have to address in every video we do. What am I talking about? Dispensational theology. What is it? Where did it come from? Has it always been taught? Why is this important? We're about to find out because we're going to do several videos dissecting dispensational theology every which way we can find. From time to time, we may even show clips of famous preachers preaching on a dispensational topic. We're going to do it critically, but we're going to do it respectfully. We're not going to be mocking people. In this particular video you're about to watch, we're going to cover a few things like the background of dispensationalism. We're going to give a general description and a definition. We're going to talk a little bit about one of the core distinct parts of dispensational theology, Israel and the church. Are they the same? Are they two different things? We are also going to be sharing an alternative view, one which we happen to believe, and that is that the Bible is one unified story. And finally, we're going to talk about the implications and ramifications of dispensational theology. There will be a summary available on every episode, and there also will be a blog for every episode. Links for both of those will be in the description box below this video. There will also be a link to download the transcript for each episode with the timestamps so you can follow along. I hope these extra tools will help you in your study time. Okay, with that said, let's get started.
I think a lot of people know a lot about dispensationalism, but they don't know it by that name.
Right.
When I was growing up, just a little background for me, just in case folks don't know this, I grew up in a very strong dispensationalist church where I got
Me
taught
too.
a lot of really great Bible truths. I'm very thankful for the church I grew up in. In fact, it's still going strong, and I'm thankful for that. They love Jesus, and so there's nothing bad I have to say about any of them. I'm so thankful. But the way that it was presented to me was not, and this would have been helpful, would have saved me a lot of time, if it was presented and said, we'd like to now present to you the dispensationalist view of. Okay, I never once heard that growing up there. And primarily it's because I don't think the people there know to say that or would even recognize or maybe say there is another view. What I was taught the word dispensations, but it was taught to me as if it was a part of the Bible, meaning, hey, let's go look at the poetic books, let's go look at the prophetic books, that kind of thing. And dispensationalism was just a word we used to understand the Bible that just meant basically the breakdown of the Bible, like a grouping of books, a grouping of time. So you have, the first 5 books are called the Pentateuch, and then, you have the historical books. Oh, and by the way, with understanding dispensationalism, we break down these time periods. So I was just simply taught that it was a breakdown method of the books. Had no idea that it was actually an interpretive method of the whole thing. So I think a lot of people out there listening to us, it's the majority view in the West. So most people have heard about dispensationalism, but most people don't know it by that name, and they really don't understand what the big deal is about it. Most people could not really articulate that. I was just taught this is the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And so when people strayed from that story, I thought they were straying from the Bible.
Mm.
So that's a little bit of, the background, how I came to know this stuff. A lot of the big names with this, Clarence Larkin, I've known that since I was a very, very young child. I used to recreate the Larkin charts. Those of you who are familiar with this, I used to draw the Larkin charts, on the back of an offering envelope, or if I was thinking ahead, had a notebook paper I could draw on. I mean, I'm talking little. I would draw in church and that kind of thing. So I was born into that. But yeah, I think a lot of people are very familiar with it, but maybe not by that name.
Yeah, I was talking to, it was my dad. I was talking to him one time, and we always get some really good Bible talks, and he said something about one of these topics, and it was a dispensational viewpoint, and I mentioned that. I said, oh, that's a dispensational viewpoint, and
Mm.
he said, "What's that?"
Yeah.
And he's a pastor. He's
Knowledgeable
he's been
guy.
my pastor. It's
Mhm.
just he's that's just how he was taught, and it wasn't even mentioned that it was dispensational. It was just the Bible, like you said.
Well, yeah, maybe we could accomplish that in this opening kind of idea is just to generally define what is dispensationalism. Maybe we could just generally talk about what the system is and that kind of thing, and then get into specifics in another video.
Okay.
So dispensationalism. Okay, so what do they mean by that? Just general definition. Well, I will answer from a dispensationalist perspective because I want to honor them and represent them accurately. So this is what they would say. They would say that a dispensation is a time period in which God deals with a particular people in a particular way. Classic dispensationalism, there's different kinds. We're just going to kind of shoot for the middle, I guess you could say, just very broadly speaking. There's classic dispensationalism. Then there's a more of a progressive dispensationalism, which is more popular today, popularized by Charles Ryrie. But if you go back, classic dispensationalism, which used to be called Darbyism, we'll get into that another time, generally believes that there's 7 different time periods, distinct time periods in the Bible, uh, which I have no problem with that. I think that's probably right. And they categorize these time periods as God having a different plan because those are different people in different time periods. They would say his administration is different in the way that he deals with them. Okay, generally speaking, I don't think I have a big problem with that. So that sounds pretty good. But the difficulty comes in where they define different things in different ways, and this is where they step outside of the Bible. The distinctiveness of dispensationalism is not that they see different time periods. It's that they view their definition of Israel and the view of the church in totally distinct ways.
Mm.
Imagine we're watching a movie and you're imagining that the movie is going along and then all of a sudden there's a hard cut in the movie and then a different movie starts. And then so after that movie's over, then the first movie you were watching unpauses. So there's this middle chunk of the movie, say like a middle third of the movie. You could actually pull out of that and you could put it as its own movie. And you could push the end of the movie and unpause it. It would be a seamless story there. That's sort of how dispensationalism works, where they believe that Israel is one focus, and then the church comes onto the scene, and they believe the church is a totally new, completely new idea when Jesus comes onto the scene. So here's really the issue is that if you believe that the church and Israel are completely separate, remember the pausing of the movie? The question is, where do you hit the pause button? If this was a timeline, where do you draw the line? Where does that line go to where the brand new entity called the church begins and the old time period that they would say the previous one before that is the law, which I agree with, which is the law. Where does that end and where does the church begin? They want to know where that line is, and wherever that line is, we're going to draw a line there, and then they want to know where does the church end. We're going to put another line. We could really take that part out of the movie. We're going to hit unpause on this previous story of Israel after the church is gone.
So it's probably when Jesus ascended.
Well, there's different answers.
Okay.
There's different answers. Generally speaking, Acts chapter 2, when the Holy Spirit is given, is when the dispensationalists would say this is when the church started. That's a very general answer. Now, there are some that are what would be called hyper dispensationalists. They would put it in, they're called mid-Acts dispensationalists, and they would see it in the middle of Acts because it's problematic for them to have the beginning of Acts because the kingdom is clearly being taught, which it is at the end of Acts too. So I don't really know. But anyway, we won't get into all the technical parts there. But anyway, so that's generally the definition is that you have Israel is a totally distinct feature than the church. They're two separate. And if they're two separate, then you got to draw a line somewhere. If people can just understand that, then you're getting to the bottom of this thing.
Okay, so they're still thinking that it wasn't just a time period that ended. Like for now, the church and Israel are both maybe running side by side still as separate entities.
A dispensationalist would answer that and say this: yes, Israel still exists because Israel's forever, but they are not significant to any theology right now. So there's a mixture of answers. I've asked dispensationalists if they think 1948 Israel becoming a nation again, so to speak. I
Mm-hmm.
will ask them and say, does this have to do with theology? Some say yes and see it as a miracle from God. And some say no, it doesn't have to do with theology, but God's hand is still in it and it will become important after the church is raptured out.
Mm-hmm.
So there's different answers on the way they see that. Some are, because see, the thing is, if God hit pause on Israel, is he working through them right now? Well, that's kind of a tough spot for them. If they're true to theology, they have to say no, but they would say, well, it's not significant to theology, but God is still working through them. So it's kind of like it's like a rubber ruler. That's like whatever is good for the time. So it's not a hard line for them. I think that's
Yeah.
problematic for their position.
Okay.
What does this all mean? Well, let's kind of hit the other side of the coin here. And this is really important, because the ramifications of making Israel and the church distinct like that, um, it really takes from us the story of the Bible. See, I now believe, as you know, because we've had so much time together, I believe the Bible is one unified story.
Yeah, me
So
too.
really, that is the difference between dispensationalism and where I'm at. And I don't even know what to call myself other than I just believe the Bible is one unfolding story. So when a dispensationalist comes up to me, and this has been all, and I'm the same as you, my family has historically been dispensationalists, and they see the Bible through this lens. Although there's been in my immediate family, there's been changes in recent years of just trying to understand this. But historically, so when I have said to some of my family members, I don't believe in dispensationalism, they say, but Kenny, don't you see a difference between um, the law and the sacrificial system and where we are today? And as a dispensationalist, that seems like a good point until you realize everyone believes that.
Mm-hmm.
That would be out of the category. That's not a dispensationalist distinctive.
That's like a common denominator for
It
all
is
of
a
us.
common
Yeah.
denominator. Everyone, no one, I mean, even Torah keepers would say there's some sort of change there. They're not looking for the temple to go sacrifice. So, yeah, everyone believes that. I mean, within reason. Anybody who's a Christian that generally believes the Bible is true would say, yes, we're not in the same time period as those who had to go and be in Israel and find the temple and Leviticus 16 Day of Atonement. No one believes that we're in that. So that's not a check mark for dispensationalism. Everyone believes that. As we develop these series of videos a little bit more, people will begin to see that the Torah keepers and the dispensationalists, this may not make sense for folks at first, but hopefully I can show this in all of our videos. The Torah keepers and the dispensationalists are actually making the exact same hermeneutical error, interpretive error, but they're making it on opposite ends of the spectrum. But it's the same error, just done in polar opposite ways. And I'll tease that out a little bit more. So, what I believe now is that the Bible's one unified story. So that means that I believe that God in Genesis 3:15 lays out the plot of the story, that from Eve is going to come from her line, a godly Messiah that will crush the head of the snake, crush the head of the serpent. That's the plot of the Bible. We are trying to track to that person the rest of the Old Testament into the New Testament at Christ's birth. Jesus beats him on the cross, death, burial, resurrection, ascension in Acts 1. So he carves out for himself a particular people, Genesis 12, Abraham, and he tells Abraham that through him, all the world will be blessed. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So far, so good. Our dispensationalist friends are going, yeah, Ken, me too. Okay. Here's the difference. I believe that when God called out Abraham, those became God's chosen people, Israelites. Now, here's the big difference. I believe now, and I have a series going at our church that we're in the middle of, that's just called Understanding the Remnant. See, a part of the ethnic group of the descendants of Jacob, part of the ethnic group there, if they were descendants, part of them were, as we would say, saved, and some of them weren't. Some of them were in covenant, and some of them were out of covenant. And so the true Israel of God, the ones the promises flowed through, are part of the faithful remnant. They're part of the ones that are obeying God. And so my contention is that those who are from Jacob that are not obeying God, they're cut off from the promises. They're not a part of the Israel of God. They're just a part of the political Israel.
Mm.
So I see these two groups in the Old Covenant. Our dispensationalist friends wouldn't make that distinction. They would see the faithful remnant, but they wouldn't say it quite like I am. The promises flow through. Because then I see that faithful remnant as being placed in Christ. When Jesus says, all that the Father has given me, I will in no wise cast out, those originated with the Father. They were with the Father when Jesus received them on the earth. Then Jesus dies on the cross, thus ending the old covenant. So this is all stuff people have heard me say before. So that is the same group. So my spiritual heritage, I believe, goes back to Adam, goes back to Abraham. That's all one story. Okay, so the dispensationalists would say that Abraham founded the nation of Israel through Jacob, and that became Israelology. Israelology, it would be a study of just Israel, things pertaining to Israel. Israel was doing poorly. Jesus was born in the first century. He presented himself as the Messiah, and Israel rejected their Messiah. Nope, you're not the Messiah. We're going to have you killed. And so they would say this blanket statement that, Jimmy, I taught from the pulpit for years because I heard it in Bible college. I heard it in my church growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And the phrase is, the Jews rejected the Messiah. They killed him. Well, this is the part that I have really looked. I've challenged any of my friends, because I have all these pastor friends, and I challenge people on this constantly. So I'd like to challenge our viewers for this now, if you're a dispensationalist. And I really do mean that, not in a snarky way, but I want to engage our viewers. I know you do too. So if you're a dispensationalist watching this, here's my challenge to you. I'd like for you to identify in the Bible a major tenet that you believe of dispensationalism, which is not only did the Jews reject Jesus, but that the Bible teaches that when that happened, he would forsake Israel and basically hit pause on that plan and turn his attention to the church. Where is that specific teaching? See, what they want to do is tell you that the Jews rejected Jesus, and as a result of that, he hit pause on Israel and turned his attention to the church. Now, I would argue against that whole thing. It's the religious Pharisees that wanted Jesus killed. The Jews made up the entire early church. Look at Pentecost.
Yeah.
It was entirely made. We're only counting men with the 5,000, and there's many occasions where we have 5,000 here, 10,000 here. That's all. It was the culture only counted men, and so you have women and children on top of that. So in the early church, Acts 1-8 is all focused on the Jews, and there were probably hundreds of thousands of converts between Acts 1-8 that were all Jews. So no, the Jews didn't reject Jesus, but what they see is that the Pharisees wanted to kill him. So they equate that, say the Jews rejected their Messiah. So what they would say is that Christ came to offer the kingdom. Now, this is where we get into all of our kingdom controversy. Are we in the kingdom? Was the kingdom in the future? Are you premillennial, postmillennial, amillennial? This all comes from this idea of Jesus came to offer the kingdom to the Jews, but they rejected him. So he pulled back his offer. And so that's the question, is where are we at with this? Did the kingdom really get offered? Did he pull it back? See, they would say he was going to set up his kingdom on earth, but they rejected him. So he left with the kingdom, and then he started this spiritual group called the church that no one had ever heard of before. And we're going to do that plan until he forces his kingdom to come for 1,000 years in the future. So yes, this understanding a total distinction of Israel and the church is the definition of dispensationalism, and the ramifications are pretty big on that. So that's what I think we can focus on as we're going through the series of videos, is trying to understand what all of this means, biblically speaking.